I generally count myself as being very much a technophile, somebody who loves technology and has been associated with technology for almost my entire professional career. In fact, I started off as a programmer, but every time you have to learn a new software and figure out new ways of logging in and getting the hang of things, it does take some time. So once again, I apologize for not being able to join you immediately. But I do, as I say, relish this opportunity to talk to you all. And what Isha told me was the format would be about 15 or 20 minutes when I would ramble on, if you will. And then thereafter, you would ask me questions. And I think the questions will be the most fun part of this. So I'm also looking forward to that. And what I will do is I'll make sure that my remarks are relatively brief. And hopefully, I'll try and make them as interesting as possible. I have had the opportunity to speak to many different groups of students over the years. And very often, the first question most students ask me is that since you're such an old person now, I'm 57 years old, they say, so you're such an old person now and your kids are out of high school and one of them is in college now, the other is working in New York. They say, since you've seen all of this, if you had to give us 2 or 3 things that really matter, 2 or 3 things that as you think about your life, your career, your life's journey, what would those 2 or 3 things be? And when I answer that question, when I think about the question, I always come back to what I call the 3 C's. So these are the 3 C's that I think are really important in my career, have been very important in my life. Now, what are those 3 C's? First is competence, and I will talk about that. Second is character, which is extremely important in anything you do. And the third, which people sometimes don't talk much about, but I think is equally important, is compassion. So for me, those are the 3 C's: competence, character, and compassion. And to illustrate that, let me just give you 3 stories from my life that will give you a sense of why I think these values are so important for all of us. Let me start with competence. As students, and of course, I remember well when I was in high school and went to college and so on, we spend a lot of time working, learning new skills, understanding subjects, taking exams, essentially building up our competence, building up our skills, building up our ability to take on difficult problems, difficult issues, and to solve them. That is competence. And as you know from all the hard work that you're doing and have been doing throughout your life, that competence is not something that you acquire in one day. Competence is a habit. Competence is something you have to do day in and day out. You have to work at it, even when it's difficult, even when that last term paper is not something you want to write at the end of the semester. It's the last set of reps you don't want to do in the weightlifting room. It's the last set of shots you don't want to hit when you're on the tennis court. But it's really pushing the boundaries in terms of what you can do that really defines your competence. And as I said, competence is a habit. You have to build it up every day gradually, so that doing difficult things, doing hard things, solving that partial differential equation, hitting that smash in tennis, dealing with that yorker in cricket becomes something that you can do without even thinking. So when competence genuinely becomes a habit, when competence genuinely becomes something that you can do without even thinking, then you are capable, you have mastered the craft. Because you never know, friends, you never know when your competence will be called for, when you'll be asked to do something which you did not expect. Now, let me illustrate that from my life. In 2014, I was elected to the Lok Sabha. I won my first term and I joined Parliament. And when I joined Parliament, obviously the set of issues I was most interested in was economic issues and financial issues, because that's what I'd done my whole professional life. And so one day I went to meet, at that time, the Honorable Finance Minister was Shri Arun Jaitley ji. So I went to meet him. I'd asked for some time and I went to meet him. And I said, sir, I very much want to assist you. You're, working on the first budget for, the government. There will be, of course, discussions and debates in Parliament. And certainly because of my own professional background, I would very much like to help you in any way that I can as far as economic issues are concerned. So he smiled at me and he said, no, no, Jayant, of course you can be quite helpful. He said, I'm just going for an important meeting. Why don't you come in my car and we can talk about how you might be helpful. So then, we got into his car and we drove towards the Taj Mansingh from North Block. We were driving down to Taj Mansingh Hotel, which is about a 10 or 15-minute drive. And I was sitting in the car with Arun Jaitley ji. So Arun ji then said, Jayant, tomorrow we've just presented the budget. Tomorrow is when the debate for the budget starts. And the person who leads the debate on the Treasury side, the person who leads that debate has a very important role to play because they have to frame the budget. They have to make sure the budget is well understood. So you know about that. I said, yes, yes, sir. Of course, I know about it. And he said, well, Jen, do you think you'd be interested in speaking on that? I said, sir, of course I'd be interested in speaking, but I thought that he didn't really mean it that seriously, because the reality is I just entered Parliament. I had actually never spoken in Parliament before. In Parliament, where your first speech, your maiden speech is a very big thing. Typically, you announce to everyone that you're giving a maiden speech. Nobody heckles you. You then read from your speech, and then you are able to give your maiden speech. So giving your maiden speech is a very, very big thing. And I didn't think, Arunji would want me to give my maiden speech and be the first person to speak on the budget. So, I said, of course, sir, of course, but I didn't really think it was going to happen. And then very quickly we got to where we had to go. And there was a big industry meeting that was going to start. So Arunji started the industry meeting and I sat with him and heard what he had to say about the budget. And then I came back home. I promptly forgot about the fact that the next morning the budget debate would start. And the next morning, when I was just getting ready to go to Parliament, Parliament starts at 11 a.m. It must have been about 9:45 or so. I get a call from the Parliamentary Affairs Minister. At that time, the Parliamentary Affairs Minister used to be Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, who's now the Vice President of India. And Venkaiah ji said to me, he said, Jain ji, I have just spoken to Arun ji. And he said that you will be the first person to speak on the budget. And I was absolutely astonished because, Arunji had mentioned it when I spoke to him the night before, but I didn't really think that he genuinely wanted me to do that. But he was absolutely dead serious. And he said, no, Jainji, you will have to speak on the budget as soon as the debate starts. So, of course, I asked Venkaiah ji, I said, Venkaiah ji, at what time will it start? It's about 10 a.m. right now. When will it start? He said, well, Jainji, I think, we'll obviously have the first set of question hour and so on. And it will probably start at 2 o'clock. So I breathed a sigh of relief and I thought to myself, okay, I do have some time to prepare. Usually when you give the budget speech, the first person on the Treasury benches to defend the budget, you are expected to speak, 30, 40, 45 minutes, which is a very, very long speech in Parliament. Typically, a speech in Parliament, when you give a maiden speech, is 5 minutes or so. So this was bound to be a very, very long speech for me. So I said, fine, let me prepare. I'll get there at 2 o'clock. But I told Venkaiah ji, I said, Venkaiah ji, in Parliament, the expectation is that you typically will speak in Hindi, but this is a technical subject. It's the budget speech. And if that's all right, I will speak in English. And Venkaiah ji said, no, that's perfectly fine. You should definitely speak in English. It's the budget. And so it'll be fine if you speak in English. So with that preparation in mind, I rushed over to Parliament. I did some preparation, rushed over to Parliament, got to Parliament at 11 o'clock and took a seat, just before all the big debates and everything else started. And I got seated. And question hour started, and it was about 15 or 20 minutes into question hour, and about at 11:30 or so, the chief whip, which is Shri Meghwal ji, came to me and he said, Jain ji, I heard you are a first-term member of Parliament, but I hear that you are going to be the first person speaking on the budget. Are you prepared? I said, yes, sir. Of course I'm prepared. Of course I'll speak. And I had been quickly trying to prepare all this while. So I said, sir, but my understanding is I'll speak at 2 o'clock, so I've got plenty of time to prepare. He said, 2 o'clock? Who said 2 o'clock? We are going to finish question hour. It's going to go from 11 to 12. Then at 12 o'clock, the person on the opposition side who's going to start is Jyotiraditya Scindia ji. He's going to speak from 12 to 12:30, 12:40, and then you have to get started. So suddenly I was astonished, because here I was thinking that, I would have to speak at 2 o'clock, but now suddenly I realized I'd have to speak at 12:30, 12:40. And then Meghwal ji also told me, "Sir Jain ji, please, Jyotiraditya ji is a very good speaker. He'll be very well prepared. And so when you speak, make sure that you counter, his criticism." So here I was, I had never spoken in parliament before. I was giving the budget speech. I had very limited time to prepare. And not only that, I had to go up against a very formidable speaker in Jyotiraditya Scindia ji, who obviously had had time to prepare, and he would put up an excellent show. And so that's what happened. At 12 o'clock, question hour ended. The speaker, who is Sumitra Mahajan ji at that time, said Jyotiraditya Scindia ji. Scindia ji gets up and he starts. He's supremely well prepared. He's got all his papers, he's got all his stuff, he's got 2 or 3 lovely quotes in Hindi, he's speaking brilliantly in Hindi, and he just goes on and on and on, criticizing the budget. And he finishes at about 12:40, and he sits down. Sumitra Mahajan ji, the speaker, looks towards me and she says, "Jayant Sinha, now speak." So this is then what I had to do. And the reason I tell the story about competence trends is because I then had to get up and speak for about 40 minutes. And I had to present my views on the budget. I had to respond to what Jyotiraditya ji was saying. And of course, he had also really made it very interesting with a lot of nice quotes, and Hindi mein kavitaएं उन्होंने बताई हम लोगों को. So it was a brilliantly done speech on his part, and now I would have to match that. So anyway, I got up and I started to speak. Obviously, I was speaking in English, and I spoke from 12:40 till 1 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock, there was a lunch break, and the lunch break stopped my speech, and I had to sit down and we had to go for the lunch break. So, lots of people came to me and said, "No, Jain ji, good start, well done. You've done a fine starting. Please continue." And then, of course, Arun ji, who was, of course, the Honorable Finance Minister then, came to me and said, "Jain, good start, but you really need to speak in Hindi also, because after all, this is in Parliament, everybody's listening to you. So you please speak in Hindi as well." So there I was, I already had this pressure of the maiden speech, limited preparation time, and now I had to speak in Hindi. So I had a lunch break of 1 to 2, so I rushed over to the parliamentary library. I had something in mind in terms of what I wanted to speak about. And this is something you all will find interesting, because I thought back to my 11th grade Hindi class, where I had done some dohas from Rahim. And so I said, well, let me use one of those Rahim dohas. And I quickly checked it up. And then I came back at 2 o'clock and I finished my speech. And at the end of my speech, I said, in Hindi, of course, I said, the honorable member from the opposition, Shri Jyotiraditya Scindia ji, has spoken very well, and he's criticized us a lot. But I'd like to remind him, बुरा जो देखन मैं चला बुरा ना मिलवे कोई जब दिल खोजा आपना मुझसे बुरा ना खोए. And I said the problem with the opposition is वो बुरा खोजने वो लोग चले गए हैं, लेकिन अगर वो अपने ही दिल को देखेंगे, अपने ही अंदर झांकेंगे, तो उनको नजर आएगा कि उनसे बुरा कोई नहीं है, क्योंकि जो उन लोगों ने अर्थव्यवस्था को, इकोनॉमी को चौपट किया है, उसी के कारण आज हम लोगों को ये समस्याएं झेलना पड़ रहा है. So I said all that in Hindi, and of course, then there was lots of applause. Everybody was very excited. Everybody said very nice things. And then Arunji sent me a little note, which I still have. I've kept it. One day I'll frame it. And there was just one word on it, and that word was brilliant. So friends, I often tell this story about having to give this budget speech with limited preparation, how it kind of went, the twists and the turns. And then finally, Arunji's little note at the end, which said brilliant, and which of course is a very treasured sort of memory for me. And the reason I tell this story around the value of competence is because the reason I was able to do that, the reason I was able to give the speech in English and talk about all the technical issues, then be able to come up with this Rahim ka doha and say it in the end, and be able to counter what Jyotiraditya ji had said. The reason I was able to do it is because I had been preparing for many years about India's economic policies, about what India needed to do as far as its economy was concerned. And I was therefore well prepared to actually give this speech. I didn't actually need much preparation time. And so I was able to give it almost extempo. And that is the power of competence. That is the power of making competence a habit, doing it day in and day out, being well prepared. And when you do that, when the moment comes, when the time comes when you have to step up, then you can do it, whether it's a big match, whether it's a big exam, whether it is a debate you have to do. If you have practiced, worked hard, pushed yourself, when the time comes, you'll be ready. And that's why competence is so important. But now I will come to my second C, which is character. You can have competence, but if you don't have character, that competence doesn't count for very much. And character is also something that you learn about yourself when things become difficult, when there are trying circumstances, and you really have to figure out what your character is. And the story there that I tell people is about what happened to me when I was at the Harvard Business School. Now, when I came to Harvard Business School, it was back in 1990. I know it sounds like prehistory. I told you I'm an old person, but it was back in 1990 before liberalization. So nobody really cared much about India then. India was, some economic backwater that no one was really interested in. And as a result of which, in my class of 800 students or so, there were really only two of us, just two of us, who had come from India and who had an undergraduate degree from India, just two of us. And so it was a big adjustment for me to learn how to do well at Harvard Business School. Many of the people who were there had come because their fathers or their mothers had been to Harvard Business School. They had gone to Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or BCG, one of these big pipelines that feed you into the Harvard Business School. So they knew exactly what to expect. But when people like me got in, we had no idea. There were none of us from India. So it was quite difficult. It took me quite some time to adjust to that educational system and learn to do well academically. But I learned, and I worked very, 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 very hard. And what I really wanted to accomplish, and it was just something that was personally important to me, was to actually be in the top 5% of the class at Harvard Business School. And if you're in the top 5% of the class, you are designated a Baker Scholar. That's a very big honor to receive when you're at the Harvard Business School. You're in the top 5% of the class. Out of 800, that means 40 people make it. And it's something you put on your resume for the rest of your life. You say you went to Harvard Business School and you were a Baker Scholar. So it was something that I aspired to. I really wanted to accomplish that. And because I got the hang of how things used to work at HBS, I was able to do reasonably well and started to get the grades that positioned me well for Baker Scholar. And so, once the exams were over, I was married by then. My wife and I went off on a vacation. And when we came back and I opened my mailbox, I saw a letter from the dean and it said, Jayant, congratulations, you've become a Baker Scholar. I was extraordinarily excited. I was really, really happy because, here I was coming from India, didn't know how the system worked really, really hard. And I made it to Baker Scholar and I had to work for 2 years to be able to achieve that. So feeling really excited and enthusiastic, I went down to the registrars because, being the IITian that I am, I always have to, figure out my scores, my grade point average, how I did, how did others do. That's a very sort of IITian thing I've figured out, and I had to do that. So I went to the registrar, and I had not got my grades because the grades hadn't come by then. So I went to the registrar and I said, hey, tell me my grades, tell me what happened, how did I make it, what was the cutoff this year, and so on. And the registrar, said, hey, congratulations, you made it to Baker Scholar. This year you had a fabulous, fabulous class, and the Baker Scholar cutoff was the highest it's ever been. But you still made it. The cutoff was 169. You got 171 points, so you just made it. Congratulations to you. You're a Baker Scholar. So I said thank you, and then I sort of went away. But again, being the number cruncher that I am, I started to kind of add up my scores, my grades mentally, and I realized, friends, that there was no way I could have gotten 171. I could have got 168, or I could have got 173, and that depended on whether I was getting an A in a particular course or not. If I had got an A in that course, I would have got 173. I wouldn't have got 171. If I got a B in that course, I would have got 168. So I couldn't see any way in which I could get 171. I could get 168, but if I got 168, then I wouldn't be a Baker Scholar because the cutoff was 169. So there I was in a really big dilemma. I didn't know what to do. Should I go back to the registrar and tell them that actually, I might have got 168? Should I just keep quiet and accept that they had me at 171 and just leave it at that? Is that what I should do? So I was in a real dilemma. I went for a walk down the river trying to figure out what I should do, and then eventually I thought to myself that lots and lots of people had worked really, really hard to become Baker Scholar. And if I was given that honor and I didn't deserve it, it would not be fair to my colleagues, my friends, my classmates to get it. So I said it's very important before I am formally announced as a Baker Scholar in front of the entire class of 800 students and their parents, I should go and check with the registrar. So I went back. Friends, I went back to the registrar and I told him, I said, look, I've done the mental calculations. I think I can either get 168 or 173. I cannot get 171. So you must go back and check your numbers because I think your numbers may be wrong. Now the registrar looked at me and he was kind of puzzled. He said, nobody's come back and asked us to recheck the grades. You must be wrong. All of this is done by computer. Why do you think your grades are not right? I said, no, you must check it. So then he went and he checked it. He looked at all my grades and then he came back and he was looking even more puzzled. And he said, well, Jayant, you're right. You could have gotten 168 or 173. For some strange reason, the computer got it wrong. And actually, when we've gone back and hand checked it, you get 168. That's below the cutoff for a Baker Scholar. I'm sorry, I'll have to talk to the dean. I don't think we can award you the Baker Scholar. So of course I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. And then, he puts the call through to the dean and I speak to the dean and the dean tells me, well, Jayant, I'm really sorry. They've hand checked the numbers. You were right. You told us that we could have made a mistake. We rechecked it and it is 168. It's not 173. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to withdraw the Baker Scholar honor that we had given you. I'm really, really sorry, but that's what it is. So obviously I was very disappointed, very sad about it. I went back and I told my wife that, oh my God, we thought we'd got this Baker Scholar thing, but it looks like I have not gotten it. But hey, that's life. What are we going to do? So that's kind of how it ended. And of course, the next day was the convocation, and I went for the convocation. Of course, all the students were there, 800 students, their parents, lots and lots of people. I think Jamie Dimon was the graduation speaker then. So it was a big turnout, lots of people. And the dean, as is always the tradition, gives a speech. And as the dean was giving his speech, he said, and a lot of great things have happened at the Harvard Business School in the last year. I'll tell you about it. But one of the most interesting and most praiseworthy things that has happened is what Jayant did. And he could have remained silent. He need not have told us that there was a need to change his designation as a Baker Scholar, but he was honest enough to come back to us and have us recheck his grades, and we had to then tell him that he would not be a Baker Scholar. But today, I think he has earned something that is much more important than being a Baker Scholar, which is the trust and goodwill of all of his students and his classmates, because through this, he has demonstrated, what his values are, what his character is, and we value him for that. And then, friends, you're not going to believe it, but this is probably one of the most heartwarming and touching things I've ever experienced in my life. The entire class of 800 students, all my classmates and their parents got up. All of the guests got up. All of the faculty got up. They all got up and they gave me a standing ovation for what I had done. So I tell this story, friends, because for me, this is a story about character. It's not about, labels. It's not about honor. It's not about, whatever prestige you can earn. It really is about character. And when the moment comes when you have to look deep inside yourself and ask yourself what is right and what is wrong, and if what is right is going to cost you, do you have the character to do what is right? And that is a question we all have to ask ourselves. Many, many times in your careers, you're all super talented, very, very successful, hardworking people. You will be faced this choice many, many times. Should I do what is right or something that's only partially right? And you will have to decide, your character will decide whether you do it or you don't do it. And it's very important that you pass that test and you do what's right. And every time you do what's right, friends, you will strengthen yourself. You will give yourself the courage and the fortitude to make the right decisions. So it's very much a journey of building courage and strength for yourself, of building your character. But please do so, because that's what will make you a special person. That's what will make you a person who can really do the right thing. And trust me, the world recognizes that. Trust me, the world really values that. I can tell you from my own experience, that is the case. So I've told you my 2 C's so far: competence and character. And not so that I bore you to death with my ramblings, I'll give you the last one, which is compassion, and try and do it as quickly as possible. So what is compassion? You may have the competence, you could be the best at whatever you do, the best hedge fund manager, the best management consultant, the best CEO, make a lot of money, have a lot of people reporting to you. That's competence. You may have the character to be able to do the right thing so that people trust you. But friends, you also have to have the compassion to care for people. You also have to have the compassion to help those that need your help. If you have character and you have competence, you have the responsibility to really be compassionate and to care for people. So caring is very, very important. And I'll give you an example of that as well. So, obviously now as a second term member of the Lok Sabha, I have done a tremendous amount of campaigning. I've fought elections for many people and done all of that. And this story about compassion, about caring, is about something that happened to me during an election campaign, which was in Chittarpur block in Hazaribagh. And I was going in Chittarpur block, I was campaigning. Obviously, lots of party workers, बड़े सारे कार्यकर्ता वगैरह मेरे साथ थे. मेरे पीछे मेरे साथ मेरे बॉडीगार्ड के लोग चल रहे थे और काफी भीड़ भड़क्का था, जुलूस चल रहा था, बैंड बाजा था, नगाड़े बज रहे थे, बहुत हंगामा था. और चलते 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 हम लोग जा रहे थे तो एक बड़ी वृद्ध महिला, एक बूढ़ी महिला हम लोगों के पास है, मच ओल्डर पर्सन, मस्ट हैव बीन इन हर 80s. तो उन्होंने मुझे देखा, उन्होंने कहा कि आप तो बड़े कोई नेता नजर आ रहे हैं, आपके साथ बड़े सारे लोग हैं, जुलूस है, बैंड बाजा है, नेताजी आप मुझे मदद करिए. Obviously I stopped, I looked at her, I said, बताइए माता जी, मैं आपकी मदद कैसे कर सकता हूँ, मैं आपके लिए क्या करूँ. तो उन्होंने अपनी मुट्ठी खोली और मुट्ठी में एक फूल था. उस बुढ़ी महिला, that old woman, she had a flower in her palm. And she said to me, she said, you're a very big leader. All I can give you is this flower. That's all I have, just this flower. But I have a widow's pension. विधवा पेंशन मेरा है. नेताजी चाहे आप जो भी कुछ करें, इस बूढ़ी विधवा को आप उसका पेंशन आप जरूर दे दीजिए. And often, when I think about all the difficulties, the hardships, the challenges that we face in public life, what we have to go through, I often think of that old lady that I met, who gave me a flower and said to me, whatever you do, make a difference in my life. Make sure that I get my pension, which is what has been promised to me, but I'm not getting it. And friends, if we can do that, if we can help those older people, if you can help the innocent children, if you can help the poor, and you can make a difference in their lives and give them what they need, what they deserve, and what is the only humane, compassionate thing to do, I think, friends, you will have done well in your lives. So I'm going to end here by saying, once again, what I have learned in my life is what really matters is competence, which is something you have to do day in and day out to get good at it. Character, which is when your values are tested during difficult times. And compassion, because all of what you gain, all of what you have is not for you, it's for others. Everything that you're doing, everything that you're building up in terms of your abilities, your networks, your success, don't think of it as being for you. It is really for helping others, making their lives better. I think these are the 3 C's we should all think about. These are the 3 C's that really matter to me. And if somebody asks me what my motto is, what really drives me, I always tell them that Sanskrit mein kehte hain, Seva Parmo Dharam, which means that service is the most noble thing to do. Service is the most noble thing to do. We should dedicate ourselves to serving others. And if we do so, we'll live very rewarding and purposeful lives. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Isha?
So I've received a few questions from some students, so I'm just going to ask them to you and you can answer those. So how would you advise students to deal with failures, especially academic and professional ones in today's very competitive world?
Failure is a part of life. And every successful person has faced a lot of failure. I have faced failures many times. And it's not so much failure that you should be thinking about. What you should be thinking about is resilience. Because we will fail over and over and over again. And we'll all be very discouraged and disheartened and feel terrible about that failure. But what really distinguishes people who succeed is that they pick themselves up after that failure. They think about what else they can do, and then they pursue that. And one of the ways of emotionally managing failure is that you should always have multiple different alternatives. So have a plan A, but have a plan B that is equally as good as plan A. So if plan A is a failure, you just switch to plan B. And remember, there are so many things in life you don't control. There are so many things that can happen that you just simply cannot manage. And therefore, failures will happen. And the key, of course, then is, just picking yourself up again and moving on to the next thing. So never be disheartened by failure.
Thank you so much. So the next question is, what do you think how prevalent do you think is gerontocracy in the Indian Parliament, and how can youth get more involved in electoral and parliamentary processes?
The Indian Parliament is actually, I think, relatively young. Between the 16th, which was my first Lok Sabha, and the 17th, which is this particular one. I think the average age has actually come down, but I may not be right because I don't have the facts with me right now. But we do have a lot of young people in Parliament. People do have a good shot at getting in. But yes, you have to make a career of it. You have to obviously be prepared to work for it. And there is a career path in politics like there is in everything else. Perhaps you start as a party worker, you start as a student politician, you win elections as a student politician. For example, I won a number of elections when I was in IIT. I was on the student council and all of those things. So I won a number of elections then. And thereafter, you can obviously start in the Vidhan Sabha as an MLA and then work your way up. So there is a career, and those who are interested obviously will benefit from starting early.
Okay, thank you so much. So the next question is, how did your experience in the Harvard Business School help you in India and in Indian politics?
You learn a lot, obviously, on many topics. So certainly, learn a lot about finance. You learn a lot about political economy. You learn a lot about business strategy. So you learn a tremendous amount about business. And in the ministries I was in, which was finance and aviation, and now as the chairman of the standing committee, all of those areas of knowledge have been very valuable and useful to me. So that technical knowledge is of great value. Now, along with that, of course, you do learn certain fundamental skills. What you do learn at Harvard Business School is how to use the time that you have to speak very well. How can you communicate your point concisely and crisply? You really learn that. And so that has been something that has helped me a great deal. The other thing that you do learn at Harvard Business School is how to find your way through a complicated system with a lot of people who are excellent at what they do. So how do you measure up against people who are very skillful, people who are very capable, and then how do you make sure that you can also do well? That also is a very important basic skill to learn, which certainly even in politics and in Parliament helps you a great deal.
Thank you. And given today's current situation with the lockdown, how do you think India's healthcare system is equipped to deal with such pandemics, and how do you think it needs to be restructured to deal with such situations?
We have a robust healthcare system. We have very good hospitals. We have some of the best doctors in the world, some of the best pharma companies in the world. So we actually, do have, and particularly Mumbai, which is famous for excellent hospitals and excellent doctors. We do have a pretty well-equipped health infrastructure. The challenges for us are much more in the rural areas, like in Jharkhand, which is where I come from. In fact, one of the very important things I did for Hazaribagh, my constituency, was to get a medical college started in Hazaribagh and a 500-bed hospital approved as well. So we really need to strengthen our health infrastructure in the rural areas, in the areas that are not quite as prosperous as Mumbai is. So that is certainly something we have to do. But nonetheless, I think we have responded extraordinarily well to the pandemic. As you know, India's cases, India's deaths have been very low compared to other countries. The Honorable Prime Minister and his whole team have done a brilliant job of managing the pandemic and the lockdown. And what is also very heartening is that our medical innovators have also come up with ways in which we can get solutions for some of the pandemic issues that we face. So, for example, we have startups making ventilators. We have a pharma companies very quickly developing, generics from some of the drugs that seem like they will work. We have our hospital chains that have really done a superb job of coming up with ICUs and isolation wards to be able to keep people. So the health sector has responded extremely well to the pandemic, and we must celebrate and thank the Corona warriors who have really been on the front line.
There's another question about the pandemic itself. So what is your perspective on the Indian economy and its ability to survive through tough economic conditions like this one?
The Indian economy is very robust. And as you can see from the IMF projections, only two major countries this year are expected to have positive GDP growth. One is China, which got through the pandemic first and very quickly, and India being the second one. So the IMF and most analysts are predicting that India's GDP growth will be somewhere between 1 to 2% this year. And that will make us one of the very few countries that will have positive GDP growth. And the IMF also is saying the following year, we are going to have a sharp recovery. We are going to go to 7.4% and resume the growth path. The economy obviously is going to go through some difficult times this year. That is bound to happen if GDP growth rate is about 1 or 2% relative to the 6% that we were expecting. But nonetheless, I think relatively speaking, we are going to do quite well.
As a member of the parliament, how does the public opinion affect the way in which you make future decisions?
Public opinion and the needs of the public are absolutely the highest priority for us. In fact, the only priority for us. And so we engage in extensive discussions and consultations. First with our voters, of course. So right now in the lockdown, obviously it's difficult for me to meet with my voters, but otherwise when I'm in Hazaribagh, for example, every day I'm meeting thousands of people and I'm listening to their concerns and their issues and their worries. And that tells me a great deal about what's happening at the ground level. So those are very useful and valuable inputs. At the same time, we also meet many other stakeholders. So if we have to make policy about any industry, we will meet with the industry associations, companies in that industry, stakeholders in that industry. And so all of those inputs go into formulating policy and coming up with the laws or the actual policies that will be put into force for a particular industry.
And the last question for today is, can you name one person who inspired you a lot and what impact they had on you?
Now that's a great question, and we should all think about who are the people who have inspired us and so on. No, obviously we have many role models, and there are many people that I admire greatly. Obviously the few that are really on top of my list or on top of everybody's list are of course Mahatma Gandhi ji, Nelson Mandela, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. These are all people who I admire a great deal, who are exemplary, selfless leaders who have made extraordinary contributions for the people, because they've always kept the interests of the people to heart, and really operated on that basis. So these are the people I admire, because they exemplify the motto by which I live my life, which is Seva Parmo Dharam.